All right, peace. Peace to everybody that's here. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And just want to say you are now tuned in to Moors in America here. We are always bringing glorious light to all issues pertinent to the Moorish American paradigm. That's what we do here on Moors in America. You're listening to the True and Living Light Bringer, Moors in America. As always, I'm your brother, Lloyd Douglas Hill, also known as Sharif Ali. We're going to be speaking with Richard Smith today. It's going to be a great show. A lot of great information dropped. Make sure you visit the links in the description to check out Richard Smith's platform, also to check out his books. Before we get started, though, I want to rise and give praise, the highest praise, to our Creator, Sustainer, our Father God, Allah. I extend honors also to our divine prophet, Noble Drew Ali, and I extend honors also to everything Moorish. And you know what? I extend honors to all the light bringers here present right now. Everyone, hit like, hit share. We're just going to go ahead and start things up. Once again, make sure you check out the links in the description. Peace, Moors. Here we go.
All right, peace, everybody. You are now tuned into Moors in America. First and foremost, here though, we always give praise to the Creator, Most High, Father God, Allah. Here we also extend honor to our divine prophet, Noble Drew Ali. That's our divine creed, and that's.
Okay, hang on. There's some audio issues, but here we go, Morris. Hold up. So, everybody, though, while you're here, hit like, hit share. Go to the links in the video description to visit Richard Smith's website when you're done watching this. Also, you can check out his YouTube. Make sure you go and subscribe over there. And here we go.
Show you the website also while we discuss Richard Smith and his books. But he shows how it affects the whole entire human family. Before we really get started, too, I just want to share some testimonials from Richard Smith's work. Let's see. First testimonial says, amazingly engaging, edge of your seat intensity. Be prepared to be blown away with the truth. Another one says, a true planetary wake-up call. Also says, Smith explores, confronts, and questions the unexplained with pained honesty. His candor shows true courage. And then also another testimonial says, a scintillating wake-up call. You will go away enriched by the experience. Smith deserves a much wider audience. So just sharing these testimonials from others who have read his work, because people are just speaking about the impact that he has, right, with what he's done. And it's, I think you're really going to enjoy this interview. Just hopefully everyone that watches this and enjoys it also shares what you're seeing. When you look here, the Trilogy of Light, just showing those three books, the Moor, the Mason, and the Alien, right? The new book is The Rise of the Invisible College. Definitely make sure you check these out. You can visit all the links in this video description. You can also go to the website, which we're on right now, ufoteacher.com. I love what we're doing here and who we're speaking to. I think maybe this will lead to more interviews in the future, looking at some of the books that Richard Smith and his wife Linda have put out, right? This is also from his wife, The Kings Are Coming, a multi-generational intergalactic odyssey. We love to see that divine union with the husband and wife and working together. That's what we also do here at Moors in America with me and my wife. So love seeing that, love working with people also that understand the importance of working together. And this is going to be an amazing interview. So we're going to just go ahead and get things started. Don't go anywhere. Hit that like and share button, and you will enjoy this. Don't go anywhere.
So
All right, so we are here speaking with Richard Smith, author of 3 books, or well, the Moor, the Mason, and the Alien Trilogy. He's a public speaker. He's been teaching for a while now. It's my pleasure to have him on here and to be discussing his new book with you guys. And we will have all the information for his website, for his books. If you want to reach out to see if you can schedule him for public speaking engagements, all of that good stuff, all this information will be in the video description. We're just going to go ahead and jump into things. I'm sure we'll have this brother back on. So people watching this later on, make sure you type your questions in the comments. We'll keep track of everything, and we'll see if we can get to that stuff later at another date. So let's go ahead and get things started. How are you doing, Richard? First off,
doing good. It's been first of all, I'm honored to come on the show. Thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here, and it's been exciting to finally get the 3rd book published. It seems like every time a book came along, there were more years spreading out in between. So the 3rd one was a bit of a challenge to finally find the time to get it done. And the beginning of this year was the big push to finally get it out there in April. So that's when it was released.
Great. So what part of the country are you in, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Originally from New York, though.
Okay. Oh, wow. So you're out there in the desert. A lot of activity out there, though.
Yes.
Yeah. I just love to just ask you, just going off of the topics or the titles of your books, the Moor, the Mason, and the Alien, right?
Right.
Just off of the basic title for those 3 books. What got you into these topics? If you could, please just let us know what led you into this type of information.
Well, the simple answer is finding the missing link, and that's the straightforward answer. But it's a little more than that. In this case, the missing link I'm referring to is the Moorish Legacy. So it took some years to finally walk that path towards it, but once I got there, I realized everything in human history and human origins, all of our creation myths, they all come down to 3 main things. The Moorish Legacy for the family of man, the Masonic agenda for those who would want to oppress the family of man, and then that 3rd silent, dubious party, and Alien Contact, which splits itself along 2 lines. What's referred to over the decades as Alien Abduction versus Extraterrestrial Intervention, and they're not the same thing. So that's where the Moor, the Mason, and the Alien came along. Naming it was important too, because I kept juggling all 3 terms around. Like, this way has the best ring, but it also puts something first that most people don't even know about or talk about in this context, and that's the Moor. Funny story about that. I was at a conference. I had the books out on the table. Someone comes up, looks at the title, and it's just that psychological blockage we all have. And they looked at the title and said, "Oh, the Moon, the Mason, and the Alien." And I'm looking at them. I'm there with my wife. I'm like, "Don't say anything. Just let him run with it. I would love to be a fly on the wall later when he finds out that it's actually the Moor." So, because he bought the book and he walked away, "Hey, thanks. I can't wait to read about this. The Moon, the Mason, and the Alien." I'm thinking, I don't know how do you mess up an N with an R, but okay. So that was one example of that psychological blockage we all have to that missing link in the story. So, because I see the Moorish Legacy as the major missing puzzle piece to it all, with Alien Contact and ancient astronauts, human origins, and how that relates to what's going on today in our modern society with current affairs. And all of the manufactured and fabricated upheaval we're coming face to face with now, which is being done on purpose behind the scenes out of desperation. So the frustration I was feeling many years ago, up to 2005, was that there's something more to this. All we're getting is a white narrative out of all this. Everybody's a victim. It was just like, I'm not having those experiences. There's something different happening on my side of the equation. And so there's got to be a missing piece. And that came in 2005, via Peter Moon, the universe answers me. And there was the book, the biography of Noble Drew Ali. And I started reading that. I felt it in my DNA. Everything was just completely reprogrammed at that point, or deprogrammed. And I was like, this is the missing piece that nobody's talking about. And of course, why would they? When you start looking in context, if it's always a white narrative, why are you going to look at this? So that's how I came to the Moor, the Mason, and the Alien. It's not only a topic of discussion to just get people to look at it and say, hey, what is this about? But also because, truthfully, it's what everything comes down to, no matter what, in our history.
Yeah, if I could pause you right there, I definitely agree with you. Those are three very taboo or secretive topics. And, just to add to what you're saying, all three things are a huge deal. Of course, with secret societies, most of the people that are sitting in positions of leadership, especially over countries, are in these different secret orders. And then, of course, you have this big, huge component of history that's like blocked out, right? The Moors ruled Europe for almost 800 years. We don't learn anything about that. And then the whole thing with the, extraterrestrials, the alien portion of that as well. It's like, well, obviously we can't be alone in this universe. There's something else going on here. And, when you do your own research, you find out that there may have been contact and all types of things occurring over the years, and it's all being covered up. So yeah, definitely a huge, understated. You can't even state how big of a deal it is. Yeah, nobody's talking about it except for a few. So definitely, I feel where you're coming from on that. And if I cut you off, please feel free.
Oh, you're fine. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. But that's how it came to that. And since then, I can start a discussion up anywhere with anyone just based on those three terms and go in any direction they want to. I have learned over the years, though, that because of those three big terms, it's better to let people come to me and ask their questions instead of giving them too much that they're not ready for. So yes. Yeah,
I understand what you're saying with that, and that's another element too that's missing when you have look at things like the New Age movement and the New Thought movement, all of these things that are happening all over the world, the different conferences and things where people are coming together to talk about some of these topics or to open up the discussion. There's still that hidden history element. It's not really being addressed properly, or there's still an aspect that's taboo that people don't want to speak about or that they don't know about. Right. So I appreciate your frankness and coming out and kind of filling in the gaps there, right? But it's still it's not being discussed, right?
So that's how the three books play off each other too.
Yeah, and I would like to speak a little bit about the Moorish aspect. I want to touch on all three, but because they are actually tied in together, and I'm sure if you could tie them in for us, or just to show why those things are connected, that would be great. But before we go to the connection between those three topics, I would like to speak about the Moorish aspect that you.
Sure.
Yeah. So why did you speak about the Moors, or why did you discuss that in there? I understand what you're saying about Noble Drew Ali, but for those that don't know what you're talking about, would you please explain why that jumped out to you, or why you saw that as a missing component?
What it got into, not just looking at the history of what Noble Drew Ali got involved with, but all the things that rolled out afterwards and why. The Moorish legacy has always been there in one form or another. I know academically we have that 800 years of history in Europe, which is the only reason why they came out of the Dark Ages there. But, and thank goodness for that. But there was a lot more that came before that. It's a spiritual revolution, a global revolution in body, mind, and spirit. The Moorish legacy represents the Temple of Solomon. And the word temple, esoterically, is a reference to the human body. So you have this temple in reference to the awakened beast of Solomon, which breaks down to Solomon, which means light, frequency, and sound. The frequency of the sound that brings the light into the beast to wake him up into the Temple of Solomon and give him self-awareness. That's how the Moorish legacy plays into this long-term as a sort of a spiritual insurrection or global revolution against what moved in and tried to take over on the planet, or did for a while, and now it's falling apart. But the Moorish legacy serves as an important platform for how to bring what's been lost back into the family of man. And that's important. The Moorish legacy represents that guiding post, that ancient illuminated manuscript throughout our entire history, right on down to our cellular memory and our racial memory, generation after generation or millennia after millennia. It's always been there, encoded into us. And we just have to look for it, because by discovering that, we realized how we've been living in a lie. By looking at that lost history, that lost knowledge, that lost wisdom, right on up to today. In fact, there's some Moorish brothers out there who are always convincing their Black Mason counterparts that, you're listening to the wrong guy. So why are you doing that? Whenever there's, let's say, a conference of some sort, and you got Moors and Freemasons all showing up, the fez, with the ability for the tassel to go all the way around, is a reference to the full 360 degrees of the Moorish reality, whereas the Mason, they can only go to 33 degrees, and they call themselves Master Masons. Well, you're kind of stunted if all you can go is to 33 degrees and you consider that the best of the best, when the Moor can do a full 360 all the way around. So there's that fundamental element that stands in contrast spiritually. There's the fact that the Moorish legacy represents the Christ energy and the Vril power, which is the Christ energy being all the Christs, whether it be Mithra, Abraham, Noble Drew Ali, Muhammad, Jesus. They all represent master architects building another wing onto the Temple of Solomon every time they come into existence. And that only furthers the efforts of the first, what's conceptually known as the first African God-man, which is Hiram Abiff, he being the original architect. The metaphors there are astounding, because they talk about how he had his magical tools, especially his magical mallet, to build the Temple of Solomon. They're not talking about something solid or tactile. They're talking about something allegorical, spiritual. And so, as the story goes, you have the three assassins who got jealous of that, Jubello, Jubella, and Jubellum, who came up to him, and I'll tell you who those three assassins were in a minute, because then it puts the whole thing into context. But they came up to him in a very abrasive manner, because they were perceiving the Temple of Solomon as some type of a Masonic lodge, members only club, and they wanted in. We want in. We want control of this chunk of real estate. And Hiram Abiff turns around and says, it's not like that, and you're not welcome here because it's a spiritual identity and you don't belong. Go away. Well, they didn't like that. They came back and they stole his magical tools, and that's metaphorical, a powerful metaphor in itself, just by symbolism. And they end up murdering him, clubbing him over the head with his own mallet. Well, if you know, literally, figuratively bashing in his skull. But that means they took his magical tools, they sabotaged that history, tried to sabotage the Temple of Solomon, and by symbolically beating in his skull, they were basically crushing his crown chakra and therefore his connection to the universe. So, which is very much in alignment with the whole idea of during the slave period in America, what happened? If someone got out of line, they were lynched. Well, the very idea of snapping the neck means you're snapping and severing the crown chakra from the Temple of Solomon, which is the body. That was that symbolism passed down by the Willie Lynch denationalization plan. So what about those three assassins? Well, those three assassins were actually what's referred to on the UFO side of things as the Grays. Those were the jealous ones. They came and confronted Hiram Abiff. He knew exactly who he was talking to. And that's what he said to them. These entities that are cybernetic in that very specific, strict sense, the way I describe it in the book. I'm not talking about other real biological alien beings who are like us. I'm talking about them in particular, just very narrow margin, but they seem to be the dominant factor at times. They're the ones that carry this adversarial attitude towards what threatens their agenda, which is the Christ energy, the Temple of Solomon, the Moorish Legacy, the Vril power, which of course relates to the female principle and the feminine goddess energy. So these things were all seen as a threat to the establishment and needed to be eliminated. And that's where the conflict begins. It's a spiritual war on one side, and on the other side, it's an oppressive agenda with an iron hand of oppression going up against the lamp of illumination, which is a Moorish reference to the crown chakra. So that's, I'm laughing saying this, in a nutshell, that's my answer.
Thank you. Gratitude. And just in case there's anyone that's listening, that's maybe that's maybe a Freemason or, you know, part of any fraternal organizations, this isn't an attack on you, but what we're speaking about here is actual history that can be traced, that you can find out on your own. If you look at the Golden Age of the Moor by Dr. Ivan van Sertima, he actually has several scholars in here contributing their works. In one chapter, Dr. Jose Pimenta Bay is speaking about the Moors and their interactions in Europe. And on page 234, he says, within the histories of such selective European societies as Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, and even the Shriners, one can find allegorical remnants which reveal the considerable historical depth of the West to Moorish Muslim erudition. He says you have specific references to the medieval Moorish connection to Masonry, which can be found. Even the name Mason means son of Moor or son of a Moor. All right. And they're pretty much letting it be known in here that the Moors who were in Europe actually created those Freemasonic orders. They created those schools of thought, right? That's actually what it says here on page 143 in the book. And so this, you know, I just wanted to add a little bit to that, because some people, especially people who, you know, who are in the orders, they never heard this stuff before. They're not part of some global conspiracy, you know, they're just regular people. Maybe they don't understand this. It's like, look, there's some things that you would have to do a little bit more research on to understand. So he's definitely, what he's speaking on has, it carries weight behind it. He knows what he's talking about. So yeah, I'll just go ahead and yield the floor to you so that you can continue. I just wanted to add that.
You bring up a good point, because I've had that question come up in talks and lectures as well. And I point out, look, you have your different levels. You have the low level, which is kind of like the coffee clutch country club. You know, they don't know anything. They're just there because they want to meet like-minded people. Okay, fine. But then you've got that next level that is behind the scenes that will find one of those average everyday members of a lodge, and they'll see something in them, and they get a tap on the shoulder, and then they suddenly disappear, and the rest of the membership never sees them. That's because they start being indoctrinated up to the higher levels of 33rd, you know, on their way to 32nd degree, 33rd degree. So that's the difference right there. I'm not talking about your average neighborhood Freemason who just has meetings every month, you know, with friends, okay? But you should be aware of what's hovering above you, all right? So if you get a tap on the shoulder, just run for the hills. Don't take that tap.
Yeah. You'll wind up at some of those P. Diddy parties. You heard about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did hear about that. I was like, what is going on, man?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, it's wild. But we're in some interesting times here. A lot of things are starting to be revealed. Right. Yeah. So yeah, definitely I appreciate you speaking about that. Now if you wouldn't mind speaking about the alien or extraterrestrial connection as well.
Oh, sure.
Thanks.
So the term alien can cover a lot of territory at once. It's kind of has an explosive meaning behind it for the title of the book anyway, okay? How other people see it is based on their personal experience. But for me, using it as a key component of the book or the trilogy is that the word itself represents a split or a division, even in the galactic community, of the benevolent factions and the malevolent factions. And if you take a look at esoteric meaning, you'll find this phrase, flesh and bone versus wood and stone. And the flesh and bone part represents extraterrestrial intervention. Those who have an interest in our ecological equilibrium with the planet, because the planet is held in high regard. The oceans of the planet are held in high regard. So knowing that we are here, there's a definite interest in making sure, you know, we look at our spiritual development in conjunction with our technological development, and how we live with the planet. And so that we're not destroying those, what ecologists might refer to as the 12 different quadrants of a collapsing ecosystem. And, you know, I can't name them all, but I know they go by 12 different quadrants. And so we've been violating a number of those for quite some time, and that has created a severe imbalance. Now, that alone breeds a certain level of interest from the galactic community into our solar system and on our planet to see how we're doing. They also have a vested interest in seeing if we can evolve to a certain point as a people to be introduced to official first contact, the actual global recognition of you're part of the galactic community and here we are. So we're nowhere near that, believe me. So that's flesh and bone, benevolent factions, the good guys in the star nations. You'll hear that Native American term too. That's extraterrestrial intervention. And that is something that favors the sun-kissed people of color and hue, the family of man, the Moorish legacy, that Christ energy, that vril power, the Temple of Solomon. That's the side they're on, okay? Then you have the other side of the equation, which is wood and stone. And that's a symbolic reference to the investment, the strict investment to the rich and valuable tradable commodities that you can strip mine out of the solar system, including this planet, and make a profit on it elsewhere. That means those of us who live on the property are replaceable chattel. We're just here to do the slave labor to dig out those tradable commodities with no regard for whatsoever for how it is creating an imbalance in the ecosystem. And so that part is the malevolent factions that I zero in on specifically as, I refer to it as the Orion Empire or the Aryan Empire, the Canis Empire. That's how our original two-party system started. And that's where the concept of upper management and middle management comes into play. That two-party system, you always have one that passes the decree and lays down the rules, and then you have middle management, which has to carry it out and do the dirty work, okay, and execute those decrees. In this case, I might refer to the Greys as middle management on this planet for quite a long time. But that's your differences right now. And of course, on the wood and stone side, you have the alien abduction phenomenon. And some people will say, well, the alien abduction phenomena has affected everyone. And I'm like, well, okay, but most of the time, it's an inarguable fact that it's targeting white America, white Europe, white Australia, okay?
So if I could get you to pause right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking about the alien abduction phenomenon, for the most part affecting people, I guess that would be considered white. There was a guy many years ago. You ever heard of Riley Martin?
What's his name?
Have you ever heard of Riley Martin?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, Riley Martin, he used to go on the Howard Stern show. He would talk, he wrote this book, I think it was called The Book of Tan. He had various experiences like with extraterrestrials. I'll let you go and research him. He's very interesting, but I'll just give you in a nutshell. His experiences were positive. He went spoke with different or met with different entities, and the reason I'm saying this is because he went on the Jerry Springer show, right? This is how old it was, and Springer had different UFO abductees on there, and he was the only man of, I guess you could say man of color. He was so-called black.
Yeah.
He was the only one on there of his complexion, and they turned on him by the end of the show. And then the other panelists, and they were trying to say that he's fake. Like, why is your, how come you didn't get probed and all of this stuff? It was crazy.
Right. That makes sense to me. That runs parallel to everything I talk about, because at that point in time, that was probably around the 90s or something.
Oh, 90s.
Him going on that show with the others, the narrative was already cemented. And if you break that narrative, they're going to turn on you. Why? Because there's that psychological programming that says, if you go against this narrative, you're not going to be taken care of by those that favor your privileged and self-entitled status in society. So don't go against your masters. So you get a person of color who comes along and says, hey, I've had great experiences, which makes perfect sense to me. Why not? I mean, family of man, extraterrestrial intervention, Temple of Solomon. Of course, I would expect that. And, you got a double whammy. Having good experiences, being a person of color, you might as well just, walk into a lion's den with blood painted all over you, okay, at that point. So I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't know about that, but that tends to run parallel to this because, and some people will argue with me, well, what about Benny and Barney Hill? He was black or person of color. Yeah. I said, yeah, but she was white. Hello? Are we forgetting that part? He was in the wrong
Yeah.
place at the wrong time, married to a white woman. Nothing wrong with that. We need more of that in this world. But still, you know, if you're going to use that, I'm just going to throw it back in your face and say that's the exception to the rule that reinforces my argument. Thank you. So, you know, we seem to forget they were more interested in her. He was just there as an attachment, and they figured, well, he's here too. Let's do this and that. But I can promise you this, that raised holy hell on the back end, because if you're going to cross that line and go against a person of color in the family of man, then, I mean, you'll never see it, but on the back end in the galactic community, that has some serious repercussions. You don't go breaking those rules, okay? So whatever did happen to Barney Hill, that I can't even imagine what kind of repercussions came out of that. So that's the covenant right there, the covenant of Gaia, that was broken long ago when the European came into existence. And that isn't such a great story either. Psychologically, they like to cling to Greece. That's how we got started. You know, Greece is part of Asia, and you guys, in your controlled narrative, just kind of magically annexed Greece to Europe. It doesn't belong to Europe, it's part of Asia. And no, Greece did not start anything. And, you know, because then the magical narrative for that is that the Greeks fell out of the sky and came from nowhere. The fact of the matter is that the Greeks came from a very dark-skinned Egypt, and that's how it got started. But you'll never hear that narrative because the Egyptian university system was intentionally severed from Europe because the Vatican came on the scene as the competitive university of control. And they're like, we can't compete with the Egyptian university. We have to sever it and make it illegal to go there. And by doing that, all knowledge was lost. And this is where Europe descends into the Dark Ages, into the bubonic plague, into the age of disease and pestilence, and all sorts of ignorant stupidity that came out of that, with superstition and, you know, the misconception of vampires and werewolves, and to the point where somebody like Nostradamus, who was trying to teach people homeopathy, even he almost had his head on the chopping block because of that.
Yeah.
So this is where things escalate once you start looking at the root causes of things, where that revolution begins, which eventually becomes known as the Moorish Legacy.
That's also one of the reasons why the Freemasons were needed. They were established to try to bring that type of information back into society. And they were also at a time, they were almost at war with the church.
Yeah, I can see that. Yes, that's understandable there. That's it. When you look at what was going on with Copernicus, he learned that to learn anything, you have to go to Egypt. So he took his school of students with him. And this is something people don't know about, but he went to Egypt, which once you know that fact, then that explains why he became public enemy #1 when he came back to Europe and tried to talk about this stuff, because that was forbidden. That was cardinal sin. Do not talk about any of that. We're not going to take anything from those dark-skinned heathens over there because they are sinful. They know things they shouldn't know, things we don't understand. And if we don't understand it, then it's against God. And so then the same thing happened with, who am I trying to think of here? The one who ended up creating his own school of thought on the coattails of that. I'm not thinking of his name, Galileo.
Pythagoras? No,
Galileo,
okay.
I think. Okay, so they learned that they don't want to turn into a martyr like what happened to Copernicus, so they put him under house arrest. But Galileo also knew. He picked up where Copernicus left off. There's a connection between the two. He took his information and realized he got this all from Egypt. We need to learn this. So that's why they had to learn it in secret, you know, and so that reinforces the idea of, well, we need to be a secret society hiding in plain sight so that they don't catch us.
Yes. Yeah, so that and you know, it's wild that we still have this cover up occurring in the present day, right?
Yeah.
We see the effects, or I guess we don't see the effects of the Dark Ages because a lot of that stuff isn't taught or taught or talked about. But we know how it can lead to the, you know, the degradation of society. You know, and covering this stuff up, it holds everyone back. It's not like it's just for one group of people. It holds the entire society back.
I can see when you step back and look at this vicious, hostile political agenda that's going on right now to whitewash and sterilize the history books. You know, it's like, oh, we don't want to teach our kids about the period of slavery anymore. That just makes white children feel bad. And says, no, it doesn't. It lets them know what they shouldn't be doing. And plus, those kids in the younger generation now are a heck of a lot more advanced than you and I ever were when we were their age. They're much more empathic and intuitive. And if you don't want that generation growing up and holding you in judgment, okay, you better let them learn. Because if they learn it at an older age, there's going to be a serious backlash that you're not going to be prepared for.
Yeah, definitely agree with that as well. So, and it's ironic that they would say, you know, they don't want what are they calling it? The critical race theory.
Yeah.
And it's like, come on, man, we haven't been teaching the truth in America. It's what are they trying to stop? You know, it's crazy. Yeah,
it's bad enough. All in grade school, all I ever heard in my history class as well. We're going to learn about George Washington sailing across the Delaware. I learned that 15 times already. Is there something more to that? Let's move on to something that's more important. But that's all they teach you.
Yeah, and I feel like it's too little, too late, though. You know, I mean, you have information at the tips of your fingers. I don't think there's anything that can be done to stop it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and now they're still trying. I mean, it's a losing battle for any fool who tries it, but they're still trying to pass legislation to try and quote unquote control the internet and the flow of information there. That's not going to happen. There's too many people in the younger generation who will rise up against that, and they'll just find another way to work around it. You can't stop them. They're clever, they're ingenious, they're intuitive, and they're creative with their solutions to work around anything that tries to stop them or throw up a blockade. And so if you can't beat them, you might as well join them, because that's what you're supposed to do in the first place. You're supposed to be teaching them.
Definitely. I agree with you there. So one thing, let's go ahead and go back to the title, Rise of the Invisible College. Now, this is the third book. Would you please speak on that and just give us some understanding for what you're referring to?
It's been a growing theme that finally manifested in this book, the third one. The first one had the subtitle, A Call to Action. The second one had the subtitle, A Real Manifesto. And then there's this one. And all the while, when I got into writing the third book, I had started looking back through the first two manuscripts for the initial books. And I started realizing, and I talk about this in the third book too, I said, I didn't realize it. I had a multitude of references to the Invisible College in the first two books, just because it was just a natural flow of the conversation throughout the first two books. And when you go back and look on it, you realize, okay, the first two books were serving as a primer, getting people ready for where I was going to go with the third one, because I had all three planned out in my head way back in 2015. So by the time you get to the third one, now everything comes full circle with the name Rise of the Invisible College. So when I first, starting in 2005, when I first was finally got to that path of finding that missing link with Noble Drew Ali and the Moorish Legacy, and getting into that narrative and all the gaps it was filling in, I started looking at that And then I started looking at a television series that, for just intuitively, I would look at it and realize, why does this one stand out? Why is this one so different from the rest of the franchise? And that series would be Star Trek Deep Space Nine. It's the type of series that created such a division in the ranks with the fan base. You either really loved it or you thought it sucked, okay? And I really loved it. And then knowing the series, because I watched the whole thing from beginning to end twice now. I had all the details in the back of my mind as I'm looking at the biography of Noble Drew Lee. I'm thinking, wait a minute, hold on a minute. And then I had this whole flood of realization. That's why that series stands out amid the whole Star Trek franchise as being unto itself. It's part of the franchise, but it's unto itself. Why? Because that whole series is about the Moorish legacy, through and through, top to bottom, left to right, no matter how you slice it or dice it, everything about that. And because, of course, you know, it's the first time you ever see a person of color as a commander who's then elevated to captain. It's the first time you see someone like him take control of an environment that's like taking the old the Ponderosa and sticking it in space, where everything comes to you, like in the old Westerns. You don't have to travel to it in a starship. It all comes to you. And you're the one that has to solve the problems. And where are they coming to? It's a castle in the sky. It's Star Trek Deep Space Nine. It looks just like a castle or a temple, aka Temple of Solomon. And he's the Master Moor. He's the prophet. He's referred to blatantly as the emissary. It doesn't get any better than that. And he is the emissary of the prophets in the wormhole, which is the line of communication to the universe. So once you see that, then everything else about the Moor, the Mason, and the alien falls into place throughout that whole series. And that series becomes the cipher and the codex for the rise of the invisible college. Because once you get that series under your belt, that becomes the blueprint for looking at everything else in television and film. And it's not that, I point out in the book, it's not that other forms of expression, writing, art, theater, sculpture, music, you know, those are all big parts of it too. But honestly, if we're going to get real about this, film is king. Film is dominant. Film reaches the mass audience in a way that no other medium can. So that's why that becomes the central point. I do get into art and music in the latter part of the book, but most of it is a reference to this invisible college hiding in plain sight right in front of us on behalf of the benevolent factions, the Moorish Legacy, Mother Earth, Gaia, who has been basically sending out this information to the mass audience all along, whether it's on the small screen or the big screen. And what kicked it off was knowing how to look at Star Trek Deep Space Nine and understanding the true significance of what Captain Sisko truly means in the entire story arc. He has 3 guardians, 3 women to back him up in that represents the real power right there, the female principle. And they got his back 100%. They don't let anything happen to him. And then you have the fact that who does he have to go up against? He's the one that's got to handle all this garbage because Starfleet can't get there in time, right? So he's got to figure out a way of creating peaceful treaties with other alien or extraterrestrial races to bring them, create this coalition, bring them on board into the family of man to stand up to what's coming. And what's coming is that which is, there you go, that which is rampaging through the wormhole, which represents, once again, the female principle, the real power. Things like wormholes, black holes, stargates, okay? Those all represent the uterine canal of reincarnation from one life to the other or one reality to the other. When you go through a wormhole, you're going through the birthing canal from one side to the other. That's a representation of female anatomy. So that's why the prophets reside in there, and that's why they only communicate with him, the dark-skinned emissary of the Temple of Solomon, aka Deep Space Nine. And what does he have to go up against? Well, on the other side of that equation is this entire empire known as the Dominion, which right off the bat, the term Dominion is indicative of corporation or corporate conglomerate or the Empire of Orion, the Orion Empire that I talk about in the books. It's a symbolism for that. And who makes up the Dominion? They're all white, they're all pale-skinned, and the ones who control it are called, of all things, the founders, which is a direct reference to the Grand Masonic Lodge, and they are all pale-skinned shapeshifters. Now, if that doesn't kick you in the ass, I don't know what would, because you have a dark-skinned prophet of the Temple of Solomon going up against an iron-handed corporation of pale-skinned shapeshifters, the Grand Masonic Lodge. And when they come rampaging through that wormhole with their warrior class and their Vorta class, the warrior class being the Jem'Hadar, they are basically raping and molesting the birthing canal. They're raping and molesting the woman, the female principle, the feminine goddess energy, because they come to invade the Alpha Quadrant. And of course, the reference to the Alpha Quadrant, the Alpha is, Jesus had once said, I am the Alpha and the Omega. It's the reference to the Christ. And that's what Cisco is. He's in the Alpha Quadrant going up against them in the Omega Quadrant. And when they come through to invade, they have their lackeys, their middle management, which is the border. Once again, pale skin, genetically enhanced, obedient. Once again, a symbolic reference to white America and white Europe. And then they have their warrior class, which are also ashy, pale skin Jem'Hadar, not as white as the border, but they're like walking zombies. And they're obedient to the white drug that serves as a missing enzyme. The Dominion purposely took that enzyme away from them to control them and keep them obedient. If they don't get that injection, they die. Wow. Well, here's the key factor. What is it? It's a white liquid controlling them. And that is a direct reference to the COINTEL program that sent heroin into the Black community, which is also a white substance. Cocaine, heroin, it's all the same symbolism. The Ketracel white that controls the Jem'Hadar, that's a metaphor for what happened in the 70s. So because it's a reference to what happened to the Black Panthers who were elevating those neighborhoods with education and knowledge, and because of that, at the time, a very white FBI ends up collaborating with a dark-skinned Sicilian mafia. So now you got that symbolism. You got the white Mason controlling the Black Mason, and the two of them are in collusion. The white Mason creates the mandate, destroy that community, and the Black Mason, which is the Sicilian mob, is sent to do the dirty work, and they start filtering heroin into the Black community to destroy everything and anything that the Black Panthers are trying to do. The symbolism is a perfect match for Star Trek Deep Space Nine. So, and of course, what are the Jem'Hadar? Genetic abominations. They can't even think for themselves. They have to obey their white masters. And so, not only, so they double as an example of a Black Mason or a house slave carrying a silver tray. And because of that, they're the ones that go out in a destructive capacity and are sent in to destroy everything else that stands in their way, which represents colonialism, okay, coming out of Europe and wiping the floor up with any culture that happens to be 7 shades darker getting in their way. So that is the cipher in the codex. And then from that, once I establish that, and I spend quite a lot of time breaking down all the symbolism there, Odo, who is one of those shapeshifters, who is casted out by his own people because he saw the error of their ways and rejected them and sided with the family of man. And what does we see, here's the beginning of a symbolism that you see replicated throughout the entire Invisible College with other films and TV shows, in that the dark-skinned prophet, or the guardian, has now taken the pale-skinned outcast under his wing as part of the family of man to bring him into the fold and give him a family that he never had, because his own quote-unquote family sees him as an outcast or a freak that doesn't belong. And once he sides with Cisco, then he really is an enemy of the state with his own pale-skinned shapeshifters. They see him as a threat. So Odo siding with the family of man, the Temple of Solomon, is an extremely powerful symbolism that you see repeating in other franchises like The Matrix or Lethal Weapon. There's a lot of them out there, and I target a couple of the key ones. And I tell people in the book, look, Rise of the Invisible College is not a who's who in the film industry. It would never serve as that. It would be impossible. But it does point out the archetypes and the key factors as a blueprint that people can then use and run with it on their own to look at these things in the right manner. And then say, oh yeah, now I see what he's talking about. And then they'll see things that I never looked at. So, the book serves as a very in-depth guidepost as to how to see what's going on right in front of you. And I take it from Star Trek Deep Space Nine right on up to the Black Panther franchise. And as far as that aspect of the Invisible College goes, and so I spent a lot of time establishing that. And then at a certain point in the book, I'm like, what would it be like if Black Panther really existed during the time of the Cold War? When you look at the way Wakanda functions in the world community in the movies, you think to yourself, man, it would have been awesome if Wakanda really existed during the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, at the height of the Cold War. How would that have turned out if they existed then? And then I take people into the idea, but we still have the Invisible College, and can the Invisible College change world events? Can it go that far? Aside from being an educational tool that shows us what we're missing, can it actually step into our society and change world events? And then I talk about that aspect of how the Invisible College, along with the benevolent factions, actively stepped in between Reagan and Gorbachev and changed the course of history with two movies that were great unto themselves. They're memorable, definitely, but when you look at the bigger picture, you realize they were released in tandem with each other as a dual campaign by the Invisible College. One is War Games and the other is The Day After. And I point out the differences, why they were released in the same year with only a few months from each other, but what was each one designed to target? How did they work in conjunction with each other? How did they change the course of history? And so I go real deep into how that led to later on, with something I didn't know, was that Gorbachev was awarded by the King Center for his achievements of not only dismantling the Soviet Union, but bringing about peace with Reagan. Gorbachev received an endless slew of awards, but the most notable one was the one presented to him by Coretta Scott King. I had no idea that these two people met. And that was a great meeting between the two. Turns out there were a boatload of other world leaders that came to the King Center and got awarded for their achievements too. So that, to me, the King Center is like another Temple of Solomon that you go to. It's just mandatory. You got to go there. And that's one of my goals in life, is to go visit the King Center because of what I learned about their living library that they have there. But that's the spirit of the Invisible College. And it represents that ancient illuminated manuscript that's embedded in our cell memory and our racial memory throughout time, and manifests in these creative expressive forms by the time the 70s came along, there was a drastic difference between what came before and what started in the 70s. There was this massive renaissance in the 70s with film. And why? Because all these master storytellers from ancient history were now being reincarnated in the form of people like Spielberg and Lucas and James Cameron and Ridley Scott and all that. And they were taking those ancient concepts and now putting them into film and saying, here, this is what you're missing out on. Whether they were doing it consciously or not is another story. But somebody was whispering in the back of their head, guiding them all along, saying, this is what you need to do, because this will set the tone for what's going to come along in the 90s in the form of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. I also go as far as pointing out that it is, and I even state the argument in the book and why and back it up. But it is my strongest belief that Kirk, Spock, and McCoy were not supposed to be the first Star Trek story. It was supposed to be Star Trek Deep Space Nine. But at the time in the 60s, that was impossible. You had to wait till the 90s when it was okay to put a black captain on the screen. All right, try doing that in the 60s, it would have been holy murder. They couldn't even stand seeing a woman as a captain's first officer in the cage. So they had to take her, Majel Barrett, Gene Roddenberry's wife. They had to visibly, and this was so obtuse once you look at it, it's like, you bastards. They took her off the bridge, stuck her way the hell in some other part of the ship with Dr. McCoy, and now she becomes Nurse Chapel. Now she's a nurse. She's no longer the first officer. She's no longer wearing pants. Now everybody's wearing friggin' skirts. Yeah. And so it just became rewired and I understand the struggles he was going through, just trying to keep a black woman on the deck in the form of a communications officer. And thank God, talking about the King Center, thank God Martin Luther King was there at the time to convince Nichelle Nichols to stay in that role because she thought she was insignificant. And he goes, no, you're on the bridge, you're visible, you have to stay there, don't quit. And it's because of that conversation with him that she carried on into a pivotal role that actually did turn out to be extremely important to the story. But as time goes on, then you get to the point where someone in Paramount finds that original narrative that was downloaded way back in the 60s. There was a group of people who got involved with these pivotal channeling sessions, and what they came in contact was something referred to as the Nine, or the Council of Nine, this extraterrestrial grouping of entities. And so that's how the phrase Deep Space Nine came into existence 30 years later, when someone dusted off that narrative and said, you know, this would make a great story. Gene Roddenberry is dead. We can do this without him getting in the way. Let's do it. And that's how a black captain gets on the screen.
Wow. And just to add to this for people that are wondering why you're talking about movies and TV shows, just to add to it, movies, TV shows, big time TV shows that are seen by a lot of people, and especially blockbuster movies. These are master opportunities to speak to the subconscious mind, especially in the movie theater where it's all dark. You're showing the image on the screen. These concepts speak directly to the subconscious mind. It's master hypnotism while we're watching the film, whatever story is taking place. You know, we're our minds at ease, our conscious minds at ease, and the subconscious mind just soaks in the that esoteric message that's in there. So yeah, definitely, this is why they still will make big time movies and put finances behind it, even if it's not going to reach the big box office numbers that they want it to. But still do it, right? Because it's going to get, you know, pushed on whatever streaming TV, you know, later on, still going to get seen. So yeah, it's huge. The industrial film And film is like the biggest export for America now, you know? Like what else is America producing? Really, it's TV shows, movies, right? So yeah.
Even if the movie isn't, if it's, you know, kind of seen, well, in frank terms, if it's seen as a financial bomb, the point is it'll gain a cult following. A prime example, and this is before Star Trek Deep Space Nine, is something that came out in the 80s that my brother and I got into later on, because initially when we saw it, we said, well, this movie's kind of weird, but then it grew on us, and then years later it became one of our all-time favorites, and that's The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai. And when you look back on that now, with everything we're talking about here, it's just smacks you in the face as to what they were doing with that film. It was not popular at the time, but it has become fantastically popular over the decades with its own cult following. And once again, who are the good aliens? They're all dark-skinned. Who are the bad aliens? They're all pale-skinned imbeciles. Okay. And what is Buckaroo Banzai lead? He leads a very diverse group of all different people who are coming together in this so-called quote-unquote Justice League type of thing to go up against the bad aliens with the support of the good aliens. And the good aliens represent the Temple of Solomon and extraterrestrial intervention. And the bad aliens represent the abduction phenomenon and the Iron Hand of Oppression and the Grand Masonic Lodge. So even back in the 80s, that was dropped in the water and created a ripple effect. And when the reason, I think psychologically and subconsciously, the reason it had such a hard time taking off at the time was because of that subconscious symbolism that white America picked up on.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And we see the power of this too, just like with Avatar franchise, when the first Avatar movie came out, like psychologically, it had an effect on a certain segment of the population where people felt depressed after watching it, seeing the symbolism with the colonialism in the movie. It's powerful. It has a powerful effect on the population. So definitely, I see the correlation with that. And I just want to thank you for doing the work. To put this out there. You're definitely a light worker. Have you been receiving any pushback from just from the work that you're doing?
Sometimes, yeah, I do. It's been minimal, and like I'll even challenge people head on if I'm standing in front of an audience giving a presentation. I'll even point it out. I said, look, you've been stunned into silence with everything I've shared with you. But the reason you're listening to me and not walking out is because I'm a white Anglo-Saxon heterosexual male. And I said, now I'm going to challenge you. Imagine if I was 7 shades darker. Imagine if I was a woman. Imagine if I was both a woman and 7 shades darker. How would you respond to everything I'm telling you now? I said, that's the test. You'll listen to me, but you won't listen to those dark-skinned elders that I got the information from. Now, why is that? Why is it okay for you to listen to me? That's your programming, okay? And you might be in a coma for the next week, but you're not going to burn me at the stake like you would a woman, all right? You're not going to try and engage in professional assassination or personal assassination or rip somebody apart. And even if someone does say something about me, it just rolls off of me. But I also recognize the fact that the reason it rolls off of me is because I was born this way into a system of that puts the white male on a false pedestal of privilege and self-entitlement, that you can't say anything ultimately derogatory. I mean, really, what are you going to do? Call me a honky, a redneck, a peckerwood? That those things I don't even recognize those terms. They don't even bother me. But I know in the reverse scenario, there are some terms that can truly hurt someone who doesn't look like me for a whole different set of reasons. Yeah. So there's a lot to that I talk about in the books. as to who I was in the past. Why did I reincarnate like this? What am I back here for now? Why was I brought back? All those things. How does that play into extraterrestrial intervention? How does that play into the fact that the things we refer to as ancient aliens or ancient astronauts are the same ones that we're coming in contact with today, because that's how long they live. So is it really ancient, or was it always there? That's the key factor. Did they ever leave, or have they always been here and we're just noticing it now?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the backlash has been, it's there when it happens, it's noticeable, but it's minimal. Most of the time when I'm giving a talk, when the audience gets real quiet, I start misinterpreting it as, oh, great, I'm losing them. But when I finish, they're all standing up with applause because they've heard something that they know deep down inside is truth that no one else would tell them. I had an interesting experience, of all places, in Memphis, Tennessee, and people look at me cross-eyed like, you took this talk down to Memphis and you came back with all your limbs attached. I said, yeah, I did. And I said, guess what? I'll do you one better. I had a black Mason in the audience, and I had a very old white couple, looked like they were in their late 70s, maybe. The black Mason was dead quiet the whole time, paying attention to everything I was saying. So was the old white couple in the back row. And everybody enjoyed it, but two significant things happened. The white couple started walking up to me, and I thought, oh, great, here it comes. I'm just bracing myself, waiting. And it taught me a lesson, not to judge it by its cover. They both came up to me. He shook my hand. She hugged me. They both said, thank you. We've been waiting for someone like you to come to talk about this. This is the best lecture ever. This made the price of the ticket. This lecture made the price of the ticket worth it, above and beyond the whole rest of the conference. This is the one that we are so happy to see. Thank you. And I was shocked. Like, wow, okay. And then, then the black Mason walks up to me and says, he's giving me the side eye look. He says, okay, that was good.
Yeah.
So yeah, he got into it too. So it's a mixed bag of tricks out there as to how people will respond to the information. Now, I've had people email some pretty nasty things to me. I've had people even message me on Facebook and refer to me as a lying traitor and all that. I said, yeah, well, okay, fine. I know that. That's why I'm here. That's the way it's going to be sometimes with some people. And as things come to a critical state with what's going on right now with this, what gets under my skin really is this white nationalist agenda right now that's going on throughout everything. And I'm like, I wish that idiot Trump would challenge me to a debate. I will tear him to pieces, but that'll never happen. So,
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's just like, I feel like I'm on this side of the equation teaching this, and there's my adversary on the opposite side doing the polar opposite thing by playing upon people's fears and ignorance and cloistered and provincial ideas because they don't bother getting out to the world. And that's a problem right there that I try to teach people about. I say, when you say, oh, I'm not racist, I don't see color, you're racist, because now you've just canvassed everybody as being like you. You don't recognize your whiteness as a raciality issue, and you think you're the archetype, and therefore you think everybody else has had the same experience as you. That's racist, because now you're gaslighting everyone else who's not like you. And so that's a big problem with that white denial. They're like, oh, don't call me a racist. Well, no, you're not out there burning people at the stake or lynching people, but you are racist in the sense that it's been programmed into you. That's the problem. You're not overtly doing it on purpose like some kind of, vicious imbecile, but you have been programmed from the cradle to the grave to benefit from a system that programs you to not see color, and that's where the problem begins.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you there. And you know, from our perspective, or people classified as black, you know, in many ways, we're still working to become a part of the human family. You know, we still have these issues where, you know, people are getting gunned down and there's nothing being done about it. So yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy, man. But yeah, definitely appreciate the work that you're doing. Look forward to having you back on here sometime again. And for people that are, for everyone watching, just want to remind you that all of his links are in the video description. Before we close things out, I just want to ask you if there's anything that you want to share with the family, the human family. Please feel free to speak on it. I will yield the mic to you, and just share any closing words that you want to share.
One of the biggest things would be is to start taking care of each other. A strike against each other is something that only benefits the enemy. Okay, so start taking care of each other. That's extremely important. And don't let the outside influences of programming and social conditioning and institutionalized thinking invade your thoughts and turn you into, how should I say, someone like me. Okay, because we've seen what happens with that. You don't want to be, in order to become me, you'd have to turn yourself into a Bill Cosby. You'd have to turn yourself into a Michael Jackson. You'd have to turn yourself into an O.J. Simpson. Okay, and we've seen what came of that. Okay, you don't want to be like me. Equality is not the same as civil rights. Equality is what brainwashes white people. Civil rights is meant for people of color, even though it's meant for everyone. But there's a big difference, and they don't have anything to do with each other. Equality is BS, because it means you have to be like me. That's equality is a nebulous term until you put an archetype next to it, and that's the white Anglo-Saxon heterosexual male. But civil rights is completely free of those constraints, as Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X lined out. So take care of yourselves, okay? And learn the difference between those two paradigms. They do not exist in the same book with each other. If you ever want to get in touch with me, you know, my official site's ufoteacher.com. All my information is there. Contact link is there. And as far as what's coming up, I'm actually releasing in June a 25th anniversary edition of the prelude to the whole trilogy, which is called Legions of Light, Armies of Darkness. And that'll be coming out June 11th. And that's the thing that represents my personal journey that led up to the Moor and Mason and the Alien. So it's a powerful, epic prelude to the whole trilogy. So stay tuned for that.
All right. Thank you. Thanks again just for coming on here and speaking with us. It's been a pleasure having you on. Everybody make sure you go and check out the links. Also, we'll have the link to your YouTube. Everybody make sure you go and subscribe to Richard Smith on YouTube. Thanks for coming on. Look forward to having you back on again.
Wonderful. It's been an honor. Thank you. Have a good day.
All right. Okay, peace. So before we close this thing, just want to remind you, make sure you go to @UFO on Facebook, @UFO on Instagram, and also on Twitter to follow Richard Smith. Also on YouTube, it's @RichardSmithAuthor. To find his channel, make sure you subscribe. You can send an email to info@ufoteacher.com. And also the website is www.ufoteacher.com. And hopefully you will like and share this video. If you enjoyed this information, make sure you share this. And on that note, we will be back at another time. Appreciate you all. Peace and love.
out to the small percentage of clients who are essential to your business. Our team of local digital marketing consultants and SEO experts is eager to help your company achieve its goals through a consultative approach, top Google rankings, and collaboration with industry experts. Here at Adept Marketing Solutions, we stand for integrity, dedication, ingenuity, and results. We know how to navigate the ever-changing digital landscape and what brands must do to succeed. Visit our website to see what we can do to help you reach your goals.
Don't let your history start at slavery. Join with Moorish Science Temple, a lawfully chartered Islamic organization, and proclaim your nationality while helping us uplift fallen humanity. Founded by American prophet Noble Drew Ali and consistently promoted plans for the betterment of humankind. We are located in Columbus, Ohio. Visit our website www.moorishamericans.com and follow us on social media. We hold live meetings on Zoom every Friday and Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Give us a call at 614-407-4394 if you would like to join or send donations to help us uplift fallen humanity. Moor is a non-profit organization focused on providing goods and services to families and individuals in our underfunded communities in Central Ohio. We have created an online presence to reach members of our Central Ohio communities, as well as local events and meetings to give away supplies and donations throughout the city all year long. Visit our website to learn more and to send a donation.
I am not a Negro, black, colored, African American. I'm a Moorish American. Peace.
Yeah. Hey, 5 on the right, 2 on the left, man. You know what time it is. Yo. We just Moors in America, soar through the shores and endure criminal acts of war on our character. 7 years after the 4th score, no reward. Shout out to the most courageous, they was jumping over barriers. Where does that compare to you? We come from a place where you scared to visit our area. We come from a place where it's scary for good Samaritans. Heavy luggage we carrying, babies having babies. It's crazy being American. Praise the one and only Allah, there's no comparison. La ilaha illa Allah, body and buried gin. Laughing at you clowns like ha-ha, dodging the Nephilim. Conquer lower self with a high, follow your regimen. Way before they came we were gods and now we specimen. Tried to take the light from our eyes, thank God for Edison. Then they put the wool on our eyes, it's so embarrassing. Now we travel frequently, we should invest in Sheraton. All of us got gold on our bodies whenever we stepping in. Screaming Ramadan, Mubarak, training the flesh again. Wishing we could move as a unit just like the Mexicans. Dodging all the foods with estrogen, synthetic medicines. All sin isn't devilish. Sometimes the decisions that you make come for a better gift. Sometimes when you sin is to relate to all your brethren. Heavenly gates all in our face, we the champions. We live in the sky, we see the angels on the chariots. Waiting on the $20 bill, face a Harriet. I bet you I'ma carry it. I'm in love with music to the point I wanna marry it. But my love for people is greater, so I write messages. Largest spending power, but we still sit at a deficit. Living amongst prejudice, even at our residence. Moors in America, flourishing, excellent. Let's buy up some neighborhoods and groom our own president. Yeah. And I come to you today with all intentions of spreading love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice.
Highest quality handmade fezzes. crafted fez with the finest wool, complete with tassel and leather sweatband. Wear the national headdress of Moorish Americans with pride and respect. 3XL size fez is a comfortable fit for brothers with dreadlocks. Shipping worldwide. Go to moorishfez.com to order. Fez Caps blends Moorish style with modern streetwear hats. The cutting-edge design features Moorish symbols with a silk tassel on the dome of the cap. More than just a fashion statement, Fez Caps represents something powerful and ancient within you. Go to fezcaps.com to order your Fez Cap now.